Anyway, is this an adventure or what? We don't need unexplained phenomena. I hope you guys are enjoying this journey we're taking you on. I know you come expecting to hear about big cats, cryptids, UFOs. We will touch on some of that, but I think it's worth sharing some of this with you, don't you? There's only 2 living souls up here today.
Because I can see it in my mind, I can see it in my head what I saw, but I can't describe.
Our eyes was closed, like a brightish light in my face, and I just felt paralysed.
Someone said there's something out there, so we had a look. It looked like a walnut. That's the only way I can describe it.
It was like it had loads of tiny little windows all over it, and it had lights in those windows, but not a light that illuminates.
Anyway, we were ushered into this lounge. This fella came in, he said, whatever you saw was a weather effect.
And everything is deathly silent. There's no sea, there's no wind, there's no night noise, because, you know, there's foxes all over here. There's nothing.
Nothing. Hi, everybody. Sunday's soon come around, and here we are again. It'll sound a bit repetitive there, don't I? But we do it, and we keep doing it. So great to see you all in chat. Thank you very much. Well over 100 people in already. Hope you've all had a good weekend, and I want to say I hope you're looking forward to the working week. But if I say every week, if you don't like I used to be, you'll not be doing. But it's got to be done. So tonight we've got a guest who's going to be talking with me, probably going to be firing some questions at me, and that's one of my really close friends, Jay Austin. And I was talking to Jay a few days ago and today, and he'd like to come on and just have a natter, share his thoughts on ufology. He's spoken at quite a few conferences now. So I want you guys to hit him with some questions as well as hit me with some. Remember, questions in block capitals. I think we've got Alison, or maybe we have anyway. I've not seen her, but if Alison's in chat helping do moderating, I know Lee is, Gemma is. She said she weren't going to do, but I think she's in. So, yeah, we'll get on with it in a moment. We'll just have a look who's in, and I can only see a few names, but Alienate UK. Let's have a look. Disabled Welshman. I hope you're feeling better, mate. I hope you're feeling a good bit better. Annie, Simon Riley. Let's have a look. Clifftop Pete. I think I know that guy. I think I'll see you tomorrow night, Clifftop Pete. Pointer, Henrietta Carrot, Dan Moon, Stargazer Eternal. I know Jojo's in. Thanks for support, Jojo. Really appreciated. Linny will be in, I hope. Mrs. Linny, Mia Girl, Jack Newcastle, and Dragonborn Rising. Absolutely brilliant. And we'll just shout Chris Max in. Oh, it's good to see Chris. We'll shout a few. Oh, Yoggles. I've never seen that name. So, hello, Yoggles. Made me laugh that. Magsu. Right. So we've got Jay Austin, and he's going to share a few thoughts on ufology, cryptid scenario, anything that you want to fire at Jay after he's spoken a little bit. Let's just get on with it. So I'll bring Jay in. How are you doing, Jay?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Absolutely brilliant. And thanks for agreeing to, share an hour, 2 hours with us tonight. And we'll just see where this goes. Because there's, as you know, our conversations, because we talk outside of this, they sort of go on for a while when we have a natter, and there's no order here. We just do what we do, don't we? First of all, have you had a good weekend?
Yeah, it's been good, mate. It's been quiet for the first time in a few weekends now, which is nice. It's nice to get back to some normality, isn't it, after the madness of Christmas and New Year?
Absolutely, yeah. And if there is such a thing as normality, but you know what I mean? But, yeah. So where are you? Have you made any plans? I know you've got a life outside of the unexplained, but have you made any plans what you're going to be doing this year as regards your research and work within Unexplained?
Yeah, so I wanted to, I don't want to use the word rebranding, but maybe level up with the website that I ran. Obviously, it started as Ufology UK.
Yeah.
And we changed the name to Phenomenology, which, you know, your previous co-person that used to help out with Truth Proof, he found it extremely hard to say, and it was a bit of a tongue twister.
It was a bit of a mouthful, weren't it? Like, yeah. So what are we now?
So we are the Anomaly Archives.
Yeah.
I think that encompasses what the likes of myself and you were interested in, where, you know, let's be honest, you know, A connects to B and B to C, and, you know, it is a multi-phenomenon when you look into this, and the deeper you go, the rabbit holes that splinter off from prosaic, you know, sort of UFO cases or UAP cases, you know, it runs into cryptids, the light formations, you know, even, you know, and I believe we're going to touch on this tonight, you know, some of the psychological stuff that, you know, witnesses experience when they encounter this strange phenomenon. So in terms of where I want to head this year, I've got a few bookings for speaking events, which I'm looking forward to. It's always great to speak to a live audience. I'm just trying to get as many podcasts in as possible, you know, and get this information out, because as you probably know yourself, you know, we're sort of, you can go to sleep one night and wake up on the wrong side of history the next morning. And there's so much stuff coming out on, you know, vast quantities to do with what we're interested in. That I think as much as sometimes I do have outside interests aside from the unexplained or the phenomenon, as we call it, this subject always drags you back in. You know, and you might find that yourself in your day-to-day life. I know you're very busy in everything that you've got going on. But there's something about this subject and what we read. Yeah, it is. And, you know, it's
to drag it up today, for example. When, you know, we'll get into a few hopefully interesting topics in a moment. But I've been busy getting that little film out for tomorrow, 7 o'clock. We're putting one out, and then I got a phone call from somebody never spoke to before. And if you're listening, you know, I do want to speak to you. But they wanted to tell me about all their, basically a lifetime of experiences. And due to some eye problems, they wanted me to take notes and relay it all. And I'd got a feeling I'd have been there days. So I've arranged to speak to them in a week and just do a little bit at a time. And they're going to let me record it. So I don't know whether you guys are going to, as in chat, are going to listen to some of this, or whether I'm going to have to write it up. But it's uncontrollable amount of stuff that keeps coming in, and then trying to keep your sort of hands and a grip on all of it, you know, because you like to do it, because some people, like this chap who rang me today, he says he's been plucking up courage. I want to tell somebody before it's too late, kind of thing. And you've got their stories and their personal details in your hands, and it's up to you to do it justice and not just put it on a shelf and forget about it. And that's the difficulty when there's only one person, you know. But that aside, I aren't complaining. What's Linny got a question? Is it a question for Jay? Hello, when are you coming up on the cliffs? Nice to meet you last year.
Yeah, nice to meet you too, Linny. I really enjoyed your company, and you know, if you get a chance, I spoke to Steve Meara the other day, and apparently your talk and Linny's talk from Awakening last year is being edited to be put out. Okay. So I would encourage anyone to, you know, seek that out when obviously it gets uploaded to YouTube. But yeah, I'm hoping to get up possibly March, I would have thought. Get over the financial burden of Christmas and back on my feet, and then I'll be up and we'll spend a couple of days, mate, and hopefully get some interesting stuff, because, you know, like, you know, obviously we talk, as we just cited, sort of like off camera. Some of the stuff you're getting is nuts, mate. You know, yourself and Linny, who joined you.
Well, there's a group of us, and it is teamwork. There's a collective. I'll tell you what, it's hard, Jay, to know what ingredients, if there's any ingredients at all, because it seems like it's one step ahead and you can't predict. Just when you think you can predict, just when you think you know what direction to go to get a little bit of a bite from it, you know, it's like James Coppett, who I went to Raincliffe Woods with other week, who's in that film tomorrow night. He said it's like fishing, you know, and you just don't know. You wherever you throw bait, you don't know whether you're going to get a bite. And we've had some really good results, particularly back end of last year, last 3 or 4 months of last year. But even now, but there's things happening. I mean, I think it was Friday, but once again, it's only Ian talking. It's only Paul talking or Pete talking. But when you look at the big TV programs, that's all you're getting off them, because it's elusive. Whatever it is, it's elusive. Ian rang me today. We were filming, and I heard my name spoken to me. And he rang me, he says, have you looked? Have you had a chance to download that footage to see if the audio's picked it up? I haven't had time. And I genuinely have not had time. But I will do. And hopefully we might get it. We got it with Jack earlier in the year, because Jack heard somebody in his ear say, excuse me. And there were nobody there. I heard a sound, but I didn't know what it was, but it picked it up and it's there. Excuse me.
Wow.
So but I don't mean you leave yourself wide open, but we still don't have that body of evidence. We get the incredible footage that Ian got. We've got incredible footage that I've managed to film, and other people up there. Yeah. But that's only lights in sky and footage. We consider what is interacting with us now, Jay, even more important. And I think I speak for everybody that's going up there. Chris Max going up, everybody that's going up there. We think that although we want to get that visual to show people in chat, the experiences that we're having now, and we're not having them all the time. But Linny felt like he'd been pulled backwards Friday. Oh, wow, we were there.
He's a big guy as well. That's the crazy thing.
Absolutely, yeah. He likes his pork pie.
Yeah, he's a unit of a guy. Let's call it what it is. Yeah. But for something to pull a guy his size back. But
it has no, to me, whatever's interacting, and I throw that out to everybody here, it does not respect size. You could be 3 foot tall or 7 foot tall. It has no respect for size, and it can reduce the biggest people to tears as well as the smallest. It makes an emotional wreck of people, whatever it is that's presenting. And I don't just mean there. I mean, the effects that it has on people as a whole. I mean, what did we talk about just before we came on, Jay? The fear.
Yeah, the fear. I'll bring up a story that's in George Knapp and Colm Kelleher's books, Hunt for the Skinwalker.
Yeah, please do.
Where, the Shermans who originally had the ranch before Robert Bigelow purchased it, they saw these orbs that had, I think as George Knapp says, and I stand corrected, it was like a blue bubbling liquid inside of them. And it reduced the entire family to their knees. Where, in George Knapp's words, I think he said it put the absolute fear of God into these people.
Yeah.
And out there in the middle of Utah, the rancher keeps a load of guns and, he's, sort of well seasoned in animal husbandry and whatnot. So he's pretty used to, prosaic stuff that goes on, in predatory animals and whatnot.
But so a light.
To see these balls of light that induce that fear is just startling to me. And I'll go back to Bringing Down the Light, in your documentary. I forget her name, but the lady who careered off the road. Elaine, when she saw the stag and the other deer, and you had those orbs that were hovering above on the road. Yeah. And she said there was a calmness to them. Now, having visited, as you know yourself, I wild camped in Danesdyke Woods when I came up probably about 6 years ago, maybe longer than that. You can't get within 50 feet of one of those deer. They are that skittish. Mm. So for something to transfix a herd of them in the middle of the road so much that she's careered off and gone into the farmer's field, I find that,
it's the different effects then, Jay, isn't it? And do we think, because I don't know, that in which case there's different types of intelligent life forms, the ILFs, or is it the same type of intelligence that resides within the sphere that's just doing different things? Do you know what I'm saying?
I kind of go along with that. Yeah, I go along with that school of thought simply because, You know, like there's people such as, I think you were the first to mention it, but it's like, you know, this multi-phenomenon thing, is it one phenomenon that wears the mask of several different things? You know, and possibly through popular culture, it's us that give it the archetype from our consciousness. So, you know, if you're terrified of a werewolf or a dog man,
that's what you're going to see.
You possibly see that, or you see these light formations.
I looked on it when I was talking about people who see Bigfoot and the popular name, but I just think it's a reinvented name for the werewolf, the dogman.
Yeah,
you know, it might not be. Some people would disagree, but regardless, we're only splitting hairs. The actual physicality of these things is terrifying.
Yeah,
and if what goes back even further, perhaps in folklore and history, are the Fae, and you know, the elemental beings, and if they have special abilities that they can shapeshift and present as other things, could everything be down to something like that? So, and I've said this many times, but I don't know, Jay next weekend goes in with a group of people in a woodland and they cause a load of mess, light a fire, they're stomping around in early hours at morning. What better way to get him to leave or Paul to leave than to present us something terrifying? And once again, we're all feeling in the dark, feeling his way around it. But there's one thing for sure, and there's like over 300 people sat in chat. And unless you've just come in to laugh, and in which case enjoy, and you know, unless you're going to be abusive, but unless you've just come in to laugh, you've all had an experience of your own, and it'll all be slightly different to my experience and Jay's experience and the next person who's below you or above you in this chat. But there's one thing for sure, it's left an impression on you. Some people will have had an elative experience. Some people will have had a terrifying one. And I think what we've got to separate is step away from the fact that it's not all good, but it's not all bad either. Instead of saying, oh, Paul had these terrible experiences in childhood, so I think everything's rotten. They're all bad. Because I can't speak for other people, can I? I've gone off on a bit of a tangent again, which I do. But go on, Jay, any thoughts?
Just to interject in there, you know, and I think this is a major misconception that we possibly all make. You're giving human emotives to something that isn't necessarily
absolutely.
Yep. So evil's kind of in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. So, you know, it's great to look at some of these things and say, you know, these are evil entities, or, you know, but much like humanity, there's good and bad in humanity. There is in the animal kingdom. You know, you can get animals that are completely submissive to us, and then you get something that wants to bite your head off. So,
but,
you know,
but the intelligence that it is, Jay, it's not even forced to recognize that we're terrified. It might be so far detached, you know, but then you'll get other people saying, oh, no, because the superior intelligence, they understand everything. But what if they just treat us like we treat cattle? We treat sheep.
Exactly.
You know, we're just a species that wants observation, where only difference is that we've sort of decided that we've broke away from digging holes and living underground or making a nest in a tree. We actually build and construct, and we've just... Don't make us better, does it? But we've just sort of stepped away.
You know, in some ways, you know, we only have to sort of look at how we treat animals on this planet and how we go around destroying their habitat and whatnot, you know, to build roads or building developments, whatever. So to you know, I always think back to whatever it is we're dealing with, whether it's things in the sky, it's multidimensional, or maybe we're dealing with something that's been here longer than humanity, you know, especially when you look at so many underwater cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I read something the other day and it kind of astounded me. And it was, we know more about space than what we do the world's oceans.
And that's incredible, isn't it? And there's so little that's been explored below the surface of the oceans of the world.
Look at places like the Mariana Trench.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we just don't have the equipment scaled to those depths. And
we've got a question here, Jay, so we'll just go through this. Jay, how did you get involved in the weird and wonderful subject of UFOs and everything in between? Thanks. Bit of a open door question, but thanks, Welshman.
No, I appreciate that. So when we spoke, I just looked. It was actually 4 years ago we did this. So I had a sighting, disabled Welshman, when I was 14 years old. How lightning sort of, if it strikes near your home at night, it illuminates the entire bedroom. Well, I moved into my dad's bedroom not long after my father had passed away. And woke up, it would have been early hours of the morning, to my room full of light. And naturally, our back garden backed onto like a big old lane. And you think, okay, well, there's a police helicopter out with a spotlight. And your initial reaction is like, is there someone in the garden? Is there someone hiding or something? Because we had a bit of an orchard back then. So I went to the window, but there was no sound whatsoever. So I opened we had a big bay window at the back, the window that opens outwards. And I opened the window and I could see our entire back garden was illuminating like a whitish light, not yellow. So not a street light or anything like that or anything artificial. And the neighbours, so like we were in a semi-detached house, the neighbours' garden was lit up. So I think I was 14 at the time, I've sort of jumped up on the windowsill, which is kind of foolish to do. And I've literally been hanging out the window to get a better view of this. No sound, no. And I think I estimate the time at being about 3:45 in the morning, which would be dawn. And this would have been around June time. So it was just starting to go that midnight blue colour sky. Not a single bird tweeting.
No.
Now, I couldn't see. All I could see is the edge of something that looked straight. And I will elaborate on this because a friend actually saw. So where my back garden is, there was a crescent behind. And a buddy of mine called Lee, that was a childhood friend. He still, until we last spoke, doesn't know the reasons why he woke up at this time. But he did and went to his bedroom. And he said there was a triangular shaped craft, literally a couple of 100 feet above our house. He said it blacked out the sky. There was no discernible lights on it or anything else. Didn't mention anything about sound, although if this window was closed, he wouldn't have heard anything anyway. But the interesting thing, and this ties in with a lot of these sightings now, he said it didn't shoot off, it didn't shoot up at a vast speed. It was just like you switched the lights out and it was gone. Now, I'm going back to being 45. I'm going back to 94. These triangles weren't a thing back then. I think the X-Files came a year or two later, and I think that was the first time in one of the episodes where they got onto
Belgian Air Force and that early 90s, they were tracking triangles and stuff. But you're right, it became more prevalent, didn't it? Towards the end of the day.
What's the name of the RAF base? Jason Gleaves had something to do with it.
Yeah, it's funny that because somebody actually, I need to contact him because somebody's messaged me and they saw what he saw.
There's an RAF base near Cheshire. Cosford incident. Yeah, Nick Pope spoke about it, and I believe some of the people on the base. I think that was 1995. They had a giant triangle, literally over the runway.
What I found fascinating as you were talking then and telling us, I don't know if anybody else picked up on it, Jay, but they probably did. You were 14 years old-ish, and you, for some reason, you woke up and saw this light and went to a window. Your friend is 14 years old-ish, and for some reason, he wakes up and goes to window. I'm assuming you don't live next door to each other, so there's be a few streets. So how interesting would it be if a lot of teenagers became aware of that in 1994, and there's people that have never said a word, and there'd have been a reason then. We wouldn't have maybe know the reason ever, but it's an awakening of sorts though for you. And I just found it interesting that for no apparent reason, your friend got up.
Yeah, it was because I remember reading back, and you had Adamski's. It was a lot like
Yeah.
the hubcap, didn't it? It was all classic sources.
Mm.
So for a friend to say that he saw something triangular in nature was like, it was alien back then.
Absolutely.
Because it wasn't in
It's all
popular culture like it is now.
Just before, there's another question, but we'll
Yeah, sure.
go on. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off if you've got
No,
more to add to it.
I was just going to say, when I was looking at this thing, and bear in mind, I could just see this piercing light and this straight edge that seemed to go on for at least a couple of houses down. And then the light seemed to fade. It didn't stop. So it wasn't like a beacon of light coming down. It just faded.
Yeah.
So whatever this was, it was bright. Now, my mate said he didn't see the light, but whether he's seen it after it shone the light, I don't know.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? It definitely it's got to be connected if it's the same night.
But the crazy thing is, I remember hearing a bang behind me, and I've jumped out my skin at this.
In your room?
Yeah. Because being 14, your mind starts doing overtime. And by then I'd only watched like the Aliens films with Sigourney Weaver and stuff. So these things were like quite terrifying. And I think Twin Peaks was around at the time. So our concept of aliens from a childhood perspective was quite terrifying. So I've heard this bang. I've jumped out my skin. I've turned back round and whatever it is has gone.
Right. Okay. It's a great sighting. So thanks for asking that, Disabled, because
I hope that gives you,
it gives him an insight. There's another question just before we do. I think our Laura's in, so I hope you've not been working too hard, Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Yeah, Lynn Peters, Margaret Webster. We've done Pete, Clifftop Pete, haven't we? Let's have a look.
Just let me say hello to Lynn.
Yeah.
Long-time supporter.
Excellent, brilliant. So that's got Bobby Dazzler, aka Amanda. So yeah, good to see you other week, Amanda. So right, let's have a look at this from Dragonborn. How do you explain your interest to someone who's never heard or experienced anything?
I obviously I've got a lot of documented evidence that I've collected, in the form of pictures and videos of things that I've seen over the years. But I think when it's weird because, when I'm, been in a workspace, and like a lot of you will experience this self, we're amongst friends and we're talking about this thing. But then you go to your 9-to-5 job and it's kind of like, oh, he's the UFO guy, and you get the eye roll, and you get the cynicism that kind of comes along with that. And then afterwards, when they see you in the gents' toilets or something, they're like, oh, yeah, can you tell me about
Strange,
something?
isn't it? Yeah.
So I think I talk, probably similar to you. I'm so passionate about this subject because I know there's validity to it, that I think that comes across in the way that you talk. Now, what I will always say is I'm not here to convince anyone. That's the great thing about, free will is, we're open to, everyone's got an opinion, whether this is real or not. I've got some friends that have literally spent thousands of hours watching the sky and not seen anything. So what gives me and Paul when he goes up on the, the cliff tops, the divine right that we see this thing? Is it connected to our consciousness? So in answer to your question, I'm not here to convince anyone. I will just talk about what I've seen and what I've experienced myself, and leave it completely up to them. If they want to believe me, that's fair enough. If you don't and you think I'm an absolute crackpot, which there's probably some truth to that. But, at the same time, I am what I am, and I can only tell it the way I tell it.
Well, it's a fact. If outside of this, I don't mean at a conference environment where you're having a beer because everybody's interested in some part of the unexplained. I won't speak about it unless somebody asks me. I really won't speak about it, and because you do leave yourself wide open. And like you said, if you know that you've had these experiences, and I'm not talking about myself. I'm sort of firing this at everybody out there. Then it's almost insulting when you get somebody who's a little bit clever, a little bit full of themselves, just telling you you're talking a load of BS. Yeah. And it can end wrong sometimes.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
I'll give you an example. Our mutual friend, who we've been fortunate enough to go to a couple of his concerts and be backstage with him. If you remember, and I'm talking about someone who's very out there in a public nature, but when he speaks about the UFO that he saw, that he said it was so close he could throw a tennis ball at, because the guy's been through addiction and that's been well documented in the media and in tabloids, the first thing they'll say is, "So were you sober?" Yeah. And I think that's a cheap dig,
It's an insult, isn't it? And outside of him, everybody gets asked that, don't they? Oh, you must have been taking something, you must have been on something. And it's an insult, because it's an insult to everybody in chat, and the ones will not dwell on this because it's all a bit negative, but for me, in my mind, the ones that I don't like are the people who sort of side up to you and talk about it, and they want to know what you've seen and what you believe, and they're really interested. Then they get with a group of people outside of them as well.
No point.
You butter the jokes. Do you know what I mean? And you think, this was good. But I mean, it literally is water off a duck's back. I mean, Linny's in here, Pete's in here, and I'm pretty good at having a laugh with people. And if they want to have a go at that game with me, I can do it just as good, and I don't mind it. Do you know?
You do develop a thick skin, but I'll go back to Manchester when we sat backstage at the MEN Arena, and this person, you can name him if you want, but I won't, just to protect him. But he was sat there and he said, "This is the most comfortable I've been in my own skin." Do you remember?
I do, yeah.
Because he now has friends such as me and yourself, Mick Park as well, I include in that are into this subject. We're not complete idiots. We vet the stuff we put out and the stuff that we talk about. And, it's to have a collective of people, I think, like that doesn't sort of translate into when I go to work on a Monday morning, and I've got to go to a boring day job and I've got to talk about stuff other than this. So, I don't want to sort of say like pouring scorn on this or anything, but it's like, people that sort of will look at us and go, "Well, you're only in it for the money." I've not made a single dime out of it.
There's no money that really is. Let's face it.
Who wants fame for being, the guy that sees the UFOs?
Absolutely. Well, when I was working on tools as a joiner, I made quite good money, a lot more money than what I could make doing this. So that's where we're at. Let's just have a quick look at this because it relates. Martin James, do your workmates have a look at you strange when you mention your interest? Well, to be honest with you, Martin, I threw my joinery tools away in 2011. I didn't. I've still got quite a few, but basically, I couldn't care less if I didn't knock another nail in my life. But yeah, they did. But jumping away from them, Martin, I think there's a change now. I really think there's a change in people's attitude towards the subject. Unless you're really entrenched in a religion or science to point where you realize, even if you think there's a little bit of light in the conversation that somebody's having with you, you're not going to change your mind. A lot of the people now I'm speaking to have got things to talk about and things that they want to hear. There's a change, but there definitely is. I don't know whether you've noticed it.
Yeah, myself, as going back to what I just said with the work scenario, it's like the people that will be in a group and do the eye rolling are the ones in private that have either had an experience and they're, like you said with the guy that you would want to speak to at the start of the show. Sometimes it takes these people years and years because, think about it this way. If you come into young adulthood and you go through school, maybe university or college, and you think your reality is this, and then you see something that completely doesn't fit into that reality. You know, how does the mind conceive that? How do you compartmentalize that in your brain? You know, whether it's a dog man that you see, or up on the cliff tops, you see one of these light formations or something. You know, how does that fit into the realms of what's conceivable in
It's
everything that we can
difficult, isn't
tell?
it? Especially if your actual lifestyle and the way you've been brought up conflicts with all of that, and then you can see why people shelve it and put it to the back of them. I've spoken to people who've said, I've said, well, didn't you say that you saw the UFO? And they'll say something really incredibly stupid. Yeah, I did, but I don't believe in them.
Yeah.
What language is this? Did you know what I mean?
That's
I don't believe in them.
Yeah, so like you're contradicting yourself.
Yeah.
Well, that's the mind, I guess, the logical mind trying to rationalize this.
Absolutely.
And when you can't fit that into a box, what does that leave you with?
Well, yeah, because what we're talking about now, what the people in chat have experienced, does not fit in the box called normal. It just doesn't, does it?
No.
So we've let me just let's have a look. Let's put this up, Jay. You're all right with these questions, aren't you?
Yeah, love it. Please encourage it.
Does Jay have any favourite subject within the genre, and does he have any experiences from his own research he could share? Well, we've 40 and we've just done Jay's sighting. But
my favorite subject that sort of I really got invested in, and now it's kind of mainstream, but was Skinwalker Ranch, because like growing up, I suppose when you watch series like the X-Files, and that deals with multi-phenomenon in each episode, be it cryptids or UFOs or shape-shifting, any of that. So obviously, when I first read the book done by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher, I was astounded at what they were getting in this one place. So the ranch is the epicenter, but that whole northeastern Utah area near Salt Lake City is like, you speak to the indigenous tribes out there, and this stuff's been going on for the longest time. And it's so normalized to them because, let's talk about the Native American culture. They're quite in harmony with things like Bigfoot and things they see in the sky, be it UAP or UFO, I suppose we'd title that. So, it's completely normalized to them. But when a lot of stuff wasn't coming out about the ranch, and I looked sort of everywhere to basically see if there were any interviews by Robert Bigelow, who bought the ranch back in, I think it was late 95, early 96. And obviously now we know ORSAP, which was a government-run program, which Harry Reid secured the funding for, $22 million or whatever it was. There was a government-run study out of the ranch.
Yeah, for something that's of no interest, of no value to anybody, but we'll invest 22 million. And back in what year was that?
So when Bigelow bought the ranch, it would have been late 95.
Well, what I'm saying is 22 million pounds or dollars now would be a lot more today.
Oh yeah, you're probably talking nearer to 200 million now.
And that's for something of no interest. Yeah. You don't invest that kind of money if there's no validity in what people are saying and experiencing.
I know George Knapp has spoken about this. I think it was on Weaponized with Jeremy Corbell, where he said, there was a lot of ridicule that, people were saying they were chasing after ghosts or poltergeists. And George actually said, no, we went where the research led us. So it wasn't, a UFO program. There was a broader aspect to this that I don't think they envisaged from the start. And I know for a fact when Robert Bigelow has spoke, he didn't know the extent of what he was getting into at that point in time. And by his own disgust in a lot of ways, a lot of people don't know this, but Bigelow invested in the likes of MUFON and some of these UFO groups that, originate from the US. And, he donated, I think it was a couple of $1 million. And he said, all you've got to do is divvy it up and make sure that it goes to research. But there's that thing called ego. and everyone wants to be the guy to be in control of this when none of us have an exclusivity
and covet the information as well, and not distribute it as it should have been.
But what I found fascinating is when he bought the ranch, he created NIDS, which was the National Institute for Discovering Science. And you've got some of the smartest minds, not just in this subject, but in other areas, astrophysicists and whatnot. And, similar to what you said before, is like no two events happen the same.
No.
When they were, like Bigelow says himself, he was always outguessed. So something would happen, say, over here, and he thought, okay, well, we'll put the cameras up over there.
And then it happens over there.
It happens over there.
It really is. It's almost, maybe that's the reason, and slightly different tangent here, but maybe that's the reason meditation and trying to connect is so good. Allowing your mind to go blank and letting the information come to you, because once you yourself, once you start to try and think about it, that thought process and that infiltration, that ingress of information from the outer nowhere kind of stops, doesn't it? And
the last, I forget the guy's name who asked the question, forgive me, but you were asking about some of my own experiences. So I went through a stage when I started my own website on Facebook, or social media channel, I suppose it's called now. And I had this dumbfounded dream that I wanted to comprise a team of some of the best people in the UK. So you had like a researcher that specialised in crop circle anomalies, someone in cryptids, someone in UFOs, abduction cases. And I wanted to bring them all together in one place, like central hub. Now, the thing that I was very naive about is you're dealing with people's egos.
Of course, I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. And sadly, everyone sort of is trying to outdo the other, whereas I've always been about, look, there's no ego in this from me. I don't want fame from this. I don't want notoriety. I just want to answer some of my own questions that I have about this. So, it didn't sort of pan out that way. But when I went down the rabbit hole of some of the more less fashionable cases, I guess, that are out there, you've got your Roswells, you've got your Rendleshams, they've been done to death and there's a million documentaries about them. So when I sort of went down this rabbit hole, and we spoke about this on the first podcast I did with you, I went through a spate of seeing shadow beings and waking up. Basically, the only way I can describe it is like having a panic attack. So I'd wake up, this thing would be over my bed. I'd wake up, can't catch my breath, absolutely terrified and frozen in fear. And of course, you jump onto Google and it gives you, okay, so you want antidepressants because it could be sleep paralysis. And it gives you all these prosaic things. Now, at that point in time, I didn't know these shadow entities were a phenomenon. I hadn't looked into it. I thought maybe it was spiritual because I grew up. And at the time, I was living back in my mother's, and my mum's a born-again Christian. So you kind of pertain that to maybe being something more spiritual than...
Yeah, but you'd woken the phenomena, though, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, I should imagine, contact a lot of other people, not just myself. But sometimes they're actually in fear of talking about it in case they revive it.
Yeah.
I know for a fact... I had quite a few conversations with a lady who with her husband and their little dog, had a terrifying experience with something on their property that set off in some fields probably a mile away, making these ungodly howls, and then another 5 minutes passed until it was under their window and doing it, and then it went away in the... But I know for a fact that me talking about it, which I were allowed to do, I didn't divulge any locations or anything, but it was just too much. It was just too traumatic for that lady to, even though she was the one that had told me, it just closed it down. And that's what happens, because sometimes it just brings it back to people. Sometimes it's almost like a release and it helps.
Well, James Lukatsky spoke about this, didn't they? So this hitchhiker effect, that a lot of people who have visited the ranch have taken away with them. And I think it was James T. Lukatsky in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, the book in there. And they took stuff back and they started seeing shadow beings. They saw orbs literally a couple of meters above the bed. The dog ended up on the roof of the house. And then his wife, I believe, also saw a bipedal dogman out the kitchen window. She screamed because James is out of town that weekend. And she saw this thing running away, kicking up leaves and that. And it's perched like, against this tree, sort of like that, watching it.
We had a man who was a bit of a disbeliever. What did he came away saying? Open-minded skeptic is what he called himself after he'd seen it. Came up with his wife. Didn't come up to see me, Pete, Ian, and the team. They came up because they were interested, and then they met up with us because he went down onto one of the stands with his wife. He might even be listening to this, and he says it's an horseshoe shape, Jay.
Yeah.
So and probably we're about 8 to 10 feet in between as it goes round, and in the darkness on a dark night, you'll not see the other side of it hardly, apart from just. You'd see the black outline of somebody. And he said he just saw a big shape just walk up and stand there and then disappear. Said to his wife, "Come on, let's go. Let's go. It'll get back to what you're saying in a moment."
Yeah.
He said, didn't tell his wife till they got in their vehicle and they were driving home. And he told him, he said he'd been frightened and he'd seen something. Didn't want to tell her. And this is the guy who doesn't believe. But what's interesting, I think a couple of nights later, I don't think it was the same night, their son, I think they lived on a farm as well. Their son said he'd looked out of the bedroom window in the early hours and there's something on the roof.
Wow.
A bipedal on the roof, sort of looking, which is interesting. It's almost like I don't know. I just think you make its eyelids flicker and you're talking about the hitchhiker effect. And I'm not so sure, and you might not even subscribe to this either. I don't think it's something that's coming back with you, Jay. I don't think it's attaching itself to somebody. Just my thoughts. I just think it's a thought process away. Yeah. Start concentrating on it, and you're inviting it, because these things don't seem to have any concept of time and space, and it just seems like it can just be there, Yeah. So I don't know.
But go on, mate. So I was just going to say, just to add to what you were saying, so some of the sightings that you're getting up there in North Yorkshire. Is it us that give it the archetype?
I think so.
Yeah. I think so too.
I think so.
These people that are saying, let's call it what it is, a werewolf up by you. And these sightings go back, hundreds of years?
There's sightings. If you look back in folklore, these things have been seen. And they've probably always been there, because when we look, let's concentrate on our area, the place we spend a lot of time. It's an holiday resort. There's a RSPB reserve that gets a lot of footfall. But soon as the sun goes down and it becomes dark up there, you can tell there's nobody up there. And that's how it's been. If it's still like that now in 2026, that's how it's been. We'll think about what it must have been like. Sort of desolate and sparse, going back decades and decades, if not hundreds of years. And if you get towards Speeton, there's just nobody at all. So what I'm saying is the phenomenon has probably always been here. The fishermen knew about it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I touched upon, I don't suppose you've experienced this with living in Bridlington, but at the same time, it's like, when we came up for that weekend that we wild camped there, I think we spent 2 nights. You were down in South Wales that weekend.
Right, okay.
And you notice the atmospheric change. Like when we pitched the tents up in Danesdyke Woods, and you know exactly where we were. We were about 200 metres from that staircase that goes down to the beach.
Yeah.
And you've just got farmers' fields behind there. you know, literally, I think we jumped in the van after we pitched up the tents, and we went to the car park in Flamborough Head by the lighthouse. And no sooner had we got out of the vehicle, there's an orb.
Yeah.
There's an orb, really low. It was a solid colour, it's not blinking. And, you know, you can get apps, you can get flight trackers, you can get satellite trackers, ISS trackers. It's not any of these things. And when my friend at the time, Bernardo, had zoomed in on his Samsung camera, which is a little bit better than the iPhone, there was like a static energy in the middle of this. And the only way you can describe it is like, do you remember the old analog TV set?
Yeah.
You know, and you used to hit channel 8 and you get the static on the screen. That's what it looked like in the middle of this orb. Silent, one colour.
Yeah.
And that was like literally within the first hour of perching up in your neck of the woods. So,
well, I'm looking forward to you coming. All you've got to do is find your train fare or bus, and everything's sorted from there, Jay.
Yeah.
So we can do that.
It's literally on my priorities, mate, for this year.
So we've got this. Let's have a look. Mark Doughty, have you thought about a dedicated voicemail number for anyone to leave experiences on? That's not a bad idea, to be honest with you, Mark. And maybe it's something that Jay could think about for his own site as well in future.
Yeah, I did. I did do it, and I had like a separate WhatsApp account where people could get in touch.
But like, while we're on, sorry, Jay, go on.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, I was just going to say, you know, in it, you know, in relation to what the question, I got one guy that ended up being a bit of a stalker, and he was messaging me all times, and then he was getting arsey with me because I couldn't get back to him. And as you know yourself, Paul, with all the emails you deal with, you know, the time zone between the US and here, you know, if you're East Coast, I think it's 8 hours. You know, West Coast, I think, is 5 hours. So there's a big disparity between the two. And this, like, I used to wake up to these abusive voice notes from this guy to the point where I had to take the number offline.
Yeah.
Because it was just...
Well, you know, when I've just put that up, then I said it might be a good idea. There's from my own point of view, there's probably no need because Don runs the website truthproof.uk. So if you've got any reports or you wanted to talk to me, even if you didn't want to write a lengthy report, just drop a line to website truthproof.uk, and I'll just give our website a little plug there because it's got loads of reports on that have never been seen or heard anywhere else in UK. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, thanks, Mary, that don't mean that we want them all to ourselves. People have wrote to us, and I always say to people, if you want to use them to put on your own website, do it. Just give us a little plug just so where you've got it from, rather than just rob it, you know. And
the other caveat to that, mate, sorry to interrupt, is just, you know, we've got the messenger facility on our page, and I'm also on social media where you can message me privately. Now, I will never put anything out without the express permission of that person.
Yeah.
You know, or they want their name leaving out. Obviously, a name adds a bit of credibility if you're saying it as a second-hand account. But at the same time, I speak to a lot of people and they're like, nah, you can't use my name. You can't use the location because I don't want it coming back on me because, you know, it sort of talks about very tongue-in-cheek, but this Men in Black thing, you know, look at your case in Humnby where that van pulled over. I think it was the family that were on their way to visit.
They were on the house.
Yeah. And they knew exactly where they were going, who they were visiting.
It shut them down. It literally shut them down. And, you know, it shut them down literally to this day. Yeah. You know, because obviously it was mum and dad who wanted witnesses. And when I first found out about Humnby, which will be 4 or 5 years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe, you know, and Andrew told me, then he introduced me to other two. He actually asked his mum and dad, would you talk to him? No. They just, it's after that being pulled over by people in uniform who are armed and taken into the back of a van, and they're all masked up as well, balaclavaed up, and and being threatened. And that's what it were. It were a serious intimidation that you don't talk about any of this, and it just closed them down. And
that plays a major part in this, buddy. Some people have had their lives turned upside down, and I go back to what we were talking about earlier, in the sense that if you've never encountered anything to do with this phenomenon for, say, the 40, 50 years that you've been on this planet, and then you see something that doesn't fit into your reality, that's hard enough for you to get your head around. Now, when you add the intimidation into that, because you've accidentally seen something or been at the right place at the right time, it's got to be terrifying. I've never had anything like that
and then add to that I don't know, the person that you trust the most, or your small group of friends you trust the most, to share what you've seen that's been a little bit life turn upside down kind of thing, and then they roll their eyes and think you're nuts. Then you just shelve it. You literally just don't want to talk about it, and that's the sad thing. That's why I enjoy getting these reports from people who've sat on things all their lives, and I'm quite happy to, if they're called Steve, to call them John. I really don't mind if I'd spoken to them face to face, or we've had the verbal conversation, not just writing something, because it could be anybody at the end of the day, couldn't it? Let's face it. Then I'm quite happy to kind of run with it if I feel in my heart of hearts that they're on the level. Right, we've got a question here, Jay. Let's just do this one, mate. Rocky, what would be satisfactory conclusion to the UAP phenomena? UFO on the White House lawn, government disclosure, would it be a case, or would there still be doubt? There is going to be doubt for some people, Rocky.
I think now, especially as we've got things like, I know Stephen Greer talks about this Project Bluebeam thing, and also with the invention of AI as a tool. It's so easily conceivable to hoax something now. And you might scoff at this Project Bluebeam, but there's literally a hotel, I think it's in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, that has a giant whale coming out of the water in front of the hotel. And it looks as real as me and you now, but it's a hologram. So if they wanted to stage something like this, it's completely plausible. It could be done quite easily.
What we got here then, Karen Oak, 72. Hi, Jay. What do you think about the big reveal, possibly the 8th of July, and President Trump?
Yeah, I know Trump obviously divides opinion, and I know this chap that's come forward, I think it was on TikTok, and he seems to say that he's had intel from someone in Trump's cabinet. Sounds weird, Trump's cabinet, doesn't it? But on his staff, that's in Capitol Hill. And apparently the President Trump has a statement prepared, ready to deliver this news that we're not alone. Now, I don't think you're going to get everything, as in some of the scary stuff, because look how we handled COVID and, the toilet roll situation and the bottles of water. Yeah. People lost their minds, and that was over a pandemic that we can talk about in past tense now. But at the same time, I think we're closer than we ever have to an acknowledgement that we aren't alone. What
do you think that would do, though? What do you think? Do you think? I think people will still go about their everyday business as though there's been a blockbuster movie released, and so what?
That's it.
I'm not saying so what. I'm saying that's what I think people will be. I don't think it's going to be some big sort of upsetting revelation as some people imagine.
But look at the congressional hearings where you've had first account witnesses, guys like David Grush that have come forward, who I might add testified under oath to a bipartisan congressional panel. And they're coming out and talking about things like NHI, this non-human intelligence, which seems to be the buzzword at the moment. And how is that not front page news?
Mm.
You know, when you've got these stand-up people, George Knapp, who broke the Bob Lazar story back in 1989, one of the best investigative journalists that are out there. How is this stuff not daily in the newspapers and front page? Because to me, two of the biggest questions in our existence are, you know, what happens to us when we die? Is the life after death? And are we alone in the universe? And I think the answer to both those questions is so complex and maybe contrived that, you know, as we say, when we're dealing with this multi-phenomenon subject, it's either one thing that presents itself as many, or the other option is we're dealing with several different things, and maybe we are dealing with, you know, part of this is little grey beings from Zeta Reticuli. You know, we're dealing with interdimensional beings, and possibly if you go down the spiritual route, you know, it could be angelic and demonic in nature.
Well, how I put it over to Andrew Collins years ago, when Andrew came and he was kind of interested in my thoughts on it, and I said, well, what if it is like a godhead? What if it, I don't mean it's like a religion, but what if it is all things to all men? I don't know. I ain't got the handle on it, and I don't think anybody has, but we throw that one about. If it's many, many things all coming through, then there, my wording for it, they're all at the other side of the firewall that we don't seem to be able to breach, then they all have access to some kind of exotic science that we don't have. And they're utilizing it. Or it's just one thing showing us many things. And I suppose for the last hour we've just battered this one about, actually, but because we don't know, and I don't know what people in chat is. Somebody will have actually told us the thoughts. We'll not get to it.
When you go into like sort of ancient history, and you can go back to sort of like Mesopotamia or the Mayans, they seemed more in tune with this than what we are currently. And there was almost an acceptance now. You know, Tom DeLonge, the Blink-182 guy, and the guy that was kind of behind To the Stars, he spoke about these cargo cults. And a lot of these religions were actually started by them having a sighting. Because you go back to ancient times, you know, the only things that flew in the skies were probably, you know, birds and the odd pterodactyl, you know, going back to prehistoric realms. So imagine you see something of, you know, something that's technological in nature that you don't understand. You would get down on your hands and knees.
You start a religion, wouldn't you? Absolutely.
You get down on your hands and knees and worship it.
Well, we've kind of likened that to, you know, the burial mounds and the earthwork tumuli. Well, there's a lot of those mounds, when they've been excavated, have contained nothing. So why have they put them there? And interestingly, they're there in places where unusual aerial phenomena are seen and strange lights are seen. And you'll walk into, you know, the woodlands and ancient forests, and you'll find a burial mound.
Yeah.
And guess what? This is where these other things have been seen. Would it be fitting then that the ancient peoples would place these mounds where they, as markers even, where they see things of reverence, where they see, like you've just said, you'd fall to your knees and sort of worship it.
Yeah.
So, you know, standing stones.
You know, equally, you've got to look at some of these stone circles that exist, these megalithic structures. And people claim that they've gone to these stone circles, stood inside them, and then been healed of the ailments that they've got. You know, okay, there's probably a bit of happenstance in there where, you know, it's a bit, you know, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, so to speak. But, you know, when you look at the accounts that have come out of the people, like Chris Bledsoe, you know, Chris Bledsoe, brilliant. Brilliant book. Encourage anyone to read it. The stuff that he's getting, and obviously, you know, he was a sick man himself, but he claims when he was seeing these light formations, these orbs, that he was healed.
Yeah.
No, do you discount those sightings? Now, you can say it's sort of by word of mouth, but you've also got to remember, witnesses send people to prison. it stands up in a court of law. If this
Yeah.
was a murder case we'd be dealing with, or
we'd have enough witnesses en masse.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know a few weeks ago on here we had there's only me sat here, isn't there? Anona Blackwell on, absolutely brilliant. If you've not spoken to Anona, wonderful, lovely lady inside and out, absolutely brilliant. But and a doctor, so she'd spoke to a lot of doctors throughout her career. And although she didn't name the doctor, which is good and rightly so, because I think he's still practicing, quite an eminent physician, and he'd seen a lady who'd got breast cancer. Were literally inoperable. You know, I don't know, I've not got all Anona's words in my head, but basically inoperable. And then he saw her again and everything was okay, and he couldn't believe it. And I think Anona's words were, he'd said to her, "You must have the most incredible surgeon." And she said, "No, faith and prayer." And you know, that's brilliant. It's a ray of light for anybody, that, isn't it? You know what I mean? Even in your darkest hour.
But that's what they say, you know, like what's the first thing they say, you know, if someone's, you know, contracted, let's say, cancer, and they say you need to stay positive. Because if you allow your mind, and this thing is so powerful, you know, and I go back to something, I think it was Hal Potoff recently said that, you know, he said, and this has been said a couple of times, you as a human species don't understand the capabilities that we have. Now, it's proven that we use, what is it, like 1/3 of our brain's capacity. And I know people such as Gary Nolan have done a lot of research into this. And they find this part of the brain, Lou Elizondo spoke about it as well, and said that when they looked at some of these abduction cases, this functioning part, or this non-functional part of your brain, I forget the name for it, it is out there on the internet for anyone to look up. There was a common consistency between all these patients that had these abduction sightings or experiences, shall we say, you know, and come into close proximity with these things. That, you know, isn't that uncanny that there's a characteristic there that, you know, as I say, you know, like these people that claim to be psychics. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of charlatans out there, and there's a lot of people that are psychic ability, shall we say. And then there's genuine people like Bob, you know, your friend and my friend, Bob Brown. You know, some of the stuff he's getting. So there are legit people out there that know how to do this stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, when we also... Go on, sorry.
No, just the subtitle of book 2, I haven't got one here. But it's the subtitles is for that very reason. And I kind of touch on some of it in the book, Beyond the Thinking Mind. Yes. Because it almost seems as though if we can eliminate the ability to overthink things and look deeply into things, that's when the experiences happen. You know, if you can switch off from reality, and it is hard. Maybe that's the key to the meditation. And that I'm not a deeply religious person, but the power of prayer, and people claim to be in touch with God. No disrespect to the religious people, but who's to say that you're not in touch with the same things that we're in touch with when we're trying to communicate? It's just giving us a different experience, a different archetype, like you said earlier.
Well, one of the things that I find interesting in this, you know, we're discussing consciousness as a topic, is like, how do you pray? You've just done it now as an example. How do you pray?
Yeah.
Pyramids. What do you have on every church or synagogue?
Yeah, we got it, yeah.
It's either a ball with a point on, or it's
triangular, yeah.
So is that an amplification of our consciousness? And like, you know, you go back to, say, like the 40s and 50s when hymns were very regimented in churches. Is that a projection of our consciousness, and it's just called prayer or meditation? However the language you choose to describe this, is it one and the same and an amplification? Because Tom DeLonge talks about again, you know, a lot of people that have experienced abduction sightings or invasive entities coming into their bedroom at night when they're asleep. There's two characteristics to this. One, it's always when people are usually sleeping, when they're at the most vulnerable. And the other thing is, like, you know, is it a projection of our consciousness? As you going back to what you were saying, because the flip side to that is people that have never had an experience, all of a sudden this starts happening to. So what's that about?
But we don't know. I know, we don't know genuinely if something external to their initial experiences has sort of caused that flip.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But let's just have a look at this.
Yes, sure.
Scooby-Doo, do you think that over time, as the cliff tops are becoming more popular with people interested in the paranormal, you are seeing more things because there is more energy around coming off you guys? I don't know. It's a good question. I believe personally it's been there all along. And it's been there. I'm not talking decades, and I've not invented this. Yeah, I go back into old lifeboat logs and Coast Guard logs when I could, the paper ones. It's all digitized now. So, and you can see all the reports of the call outs and the false alarms with good intent. When you speak to the fishermen, or remember, like we said earlier, these are the people that are up there after dark, the only people that are going to be frequenting those cliff tops. And they've all got stories. And and we're talking 50 years worth of experience up on those remote areas. You speak to Andy Barnby, who's a good friend but well respected within the fishing community, and Andy will say, when we go to Clubhouse, he doesn't say every night, he says, but occasionally they'll start talking about things that they've seen, and I'll say, will you tell Paul? And some of them will go, no, not saying a word. And it doesn't leave that secular group of friends. That's not because it's me. That's just the way that these communities are. Because it does become a community. It's like a mining community or any group of people that are pretty close-knit who do something that's unique to them. They become a little club, don't they? And they don't speak about it outside of that little club, which is a shame. But we're getting more of it.
I'll go back to an example, and this stands out. Was it somebody Quinn? Who was the troll man? Tom Quinn, the massive guy with the Maori tattoos.
Yeah. Great guy. I really like Tom.
Yeah, great guy. And his account, and obviously how that came about with the answer phone message where they were having that conversation is crazy. And like, why is a guy going to make up a story like that?
Well, what it was, I was looking into an aircraft crash over at North Sea.
Yeah.
And it was 1985. It was December 12, 1985, ZA610. Unusual circumstances. And Tom was the guy that retrieved the navigator, the co-pilot. I'd probably say navigator and getting it wrong for some seasoned aircraft experts. But their trawler hit the wreckage of the aircraft. And basically, and they were telling me all about it. And I got a message because I'd looked into this for like 18 months, quite a long time. I've got lots of information, been in lots of archives digging and spoke to lots of people. And I got a message on my answer phone, and it was a recording of Tom and other fishermen in the warehouse talking, not about that, just talking. So I got a voice recorder and I recorded it off the answer phone, took it down to them, and he couldn't believe it. So somebody had done that. Whether people want to believe it or not, and because he said to me, "Have you been recording this?" I said, "No, I haven't." It were really weird, and why the lengths that you'd go to for that? Tell you what's interesting as well. That wreckage, that aircraft went down on December 12th, 1985. The navigator or the wreck was hit, as in their nets hit it on December the 16th, 1985.
Yeah,
and they recovered this unfortunate man. But then in 1989, let me get this correct. I think it was 1987. I might have got my dates from 1987. They were in a boat called the Betty, a little trawler called the Betty. I think
fishing for Queenies, I think, wasn't it?
You're fishing for Queenies, like big So, which is interesting because they've got bags of these things. And when military came alongside, which was the HMS Brecon, a minesweeper, they asked them, who'd been around this man, and they said, he put his hand up and said, "I have," because they were trying to free the nets from the ejector seat. He says, well, he could be potentially radioactive, or the area could be. So all their fishing bags of Queenies went over the side.
Yeah, I think they said they were reimbursed, weren't they, as well?
They were reimbursed, yeah. They were reimbursed. But my point is, this is just coincidence, this. I think it was 1987, the same boat, the Vetty, same crew, and Tom's, I think they're about 6 or 8 miles out, and he said he'd seen a man in water. And they said, "What do you mean?" The other crew members said, "No," he said, "I've seen somebody in water." He says, and we steamed as they talked off towards where Tom thought he'd seen this man, and sure enough, there's a man in water, 6 to 8 miles out, in casual clothing, shoes on. They get him aboard. Unfortunately, we're in a really bad way, and he didn't survive. But Tom found him, and that were an aircraft that had gone down inland. That they never found aircraft. They don't know how he came to be there. Now, obviously, this conversation, it could be a lot more detailed, but I'd like all information in front of me to share it with you guys in chat than go into it today. But what's the chances of that same man, retrieving 2 people in the same boat? Do you know what I mean? If you talk about coincidences, it's incredible, really. But
why the guy they retrieved? They were warned about the radiation effect.
He'd been in assess. Oh yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And
but surely there's only a charge in the ejector seat, so there's no plausible reason why that pilot or whoever he was, navigator, could have been radioactive.
Yeah, there's nothing funny when I say this, but to hear him retell it, he said when we radioed in that we'd found the wreckage, or we thought we'd hit the wreckage, because he said the boat literally just thought we were going to rip back end at boat off when they hit this tornado aircraft. And he said it was a short amount of time before there's helicopters around us and there's boats steaming towards us. And as I said, the first boat that came was the HMS Brecon, the minesweeper. He says, and they're waving. He says, and I'm waving back to them. Just says, and when I got within earshot, they're saying, get away from the ejector seat. There's enough explosive in it to blow it back at trawler off. So, but obviously nothing happened like that. But it's a tragedy. I think that's what we've got to focus on as well, because I think there's too many live streams, chats, podcasts talk about missing people, talk about things like this, as though we know it's interesting, but it shouldn't become just good entertainment. I don't think. Maybe I stay, but that's what people tend to do, Jay. Let's just have a quick look at this, mate.
Yeah, sure.
What's your view on saber synthetic astrobiological extraterrestrial races? Apparently something the authorities do. Well, Shadow, I think you know more about this than me, my friend. I'm serious, I don't. So
yeah, I've not heard of that one myself, but
thanks for bringing it to his attention. I'll make a note of that actually, and I will have a look. Thank you. I haven't, Paul. I don't know. Somebody said something to me, but I've missed that. And if you haven't done, as Lee's just said, totally free. Jay's sat here. I'm sat here. A couple of hours of our time. We enjoy speaking with you guys. Like and subscribe. It's literally there. It's free. It costs you nothing. Just consider giving us a little bit of a leg up, please.
Hit that share button as well.
I never say after this. Do you know, I almost got shamed a few weeks ago. Somebody put in comments like I'd done something wrong, showing his books. How blatant. You know what I mean? You think to yourself, yeah.
Let me just add, mate, your books, the level of detail in your books is incredible. I know I'm slightly biased because we're friends, outside of what we do, but for me, obviously I'm a little bit your junior. You're someone that I look up to in the community, and as you become more seasoned in this, I have my group of people that I know I can trust with implicity. I can relay stories to, and they'll relay some stories back and some accounts. You find who you can trust and who's believable in this subject. And I would put you head and shoulders above most people, to be honest, mate.
Well, thank you, and that is appreciated. And do you know something? I love. I mean, somebody's going to tell me afterwards, either Lee, Alison, or Gemma, that whether everybody in chat's been kind of respectful. But for the most part, I want a great bunch of people, and this is what we're doing it for. This is what you're
doing.
And yeah, absolutely. And but thank you. Do not go into areas where the Fae are doing the wrong thing, please. Be respectful always, Steve Collins says. Yeah, I would agree. And I used to spend a bit of time, I don't mean every week, but I was talking to a Native American Indian called Larry Sespooch. And you can go on internet. I don't know whether there'll be anything on about Larry still, because it's a few years since now. But, you know, you were a
guy.
Well, it was me that put him on to him.
Yeah.
It was me that told. I think I told George Knapp about him and that. I said, you know, if you want someone, and it could have been. And it was me that. I don't know who I told. Could have been George. I think it was. I says, you know, the guy that you want to be speaking to is Larry Sespooch, because he's got a lot of knowledge on the Skinwalker, and you know, and he's getting on in years, and he's had all this knowledge passed down to him. And yeah, I wanted to know, because I was looking into the accounts of the Flixton werewolf, whether he thought we were dealing with similar things. Do you know what I mean? It's you know, it's a small world, isn't it? You know,
but isn't it weird when, you know, like, obviously we sort of romanticize the ideal of these fairy circles or fairy rings, and you know, it's sort of popularized, shall we say, by things like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell and the Disney kind of, you know, these things are all positive. Whereas, like, you know, you go into, you know, some of the Irish folklore, you know, some of the stuff our friend Barry Fitzgerald has researched. And at the same time, it's like, it's not all positive. Some of these things terrify the life out of people.
Absolutely, because you've got to respect, you know, let's believe the reality of these things. Then you've got to respect the ground and the earth that these earth elementals actually reside in. And
Exactly.
You know, I often say it, but a lot of this could be down to something like that. You know, a lot of it would explain a lot when people. I did a short the other day. I went up into a place called Waldgate.
Okay.
Which is literally, Jay, for 3 miles, if that, from where I'm sat now. And it's Waldgate Crossroads. It's an old Roman road. It's tarmac now, but it's on an old Roman road. And there's a wood at the side of it called Sands Wood. And I went in there because a farmer told me that one of his farmhands, Lithuanian, I think it was, or Eastern European, a lady had seen a Bigfoot in the woods there. And it tied in with what Michael, who comes in chat and probably look at this afterwards if he's not already in, he'd already seen something really unusual while cycling from his home into Bridlington, and the wood, literally the field that he saw this thing run across from, the woods just behind it. And I was trying to tie in the similarities to what Michael had seen. But where am I going with this? It kind of ties in, because I don't personally believe that these things are resident. I don't know what you think. They're too big. They're too imposing. They look like apex predators. And then you've got this strange, almost magical element that people describe that totally discredits it if it's a living, breathing, flesh and blood creature. We've got a tree that wide, and this thing's 3 foot wide, and it walks behind tree and don't come out other side. You know, it just and when they describe it as moving like it's on a conveyor belt or an escalator. You know, there were a guy in a place called Swinemore, which is close to Hull. So some people in our area, East Yorkshire, will know where I mean. And I'm going back years and years now, but I'll not name him. I do speak to him odd times. Don't live in this country anymore. But he says he were always up to no good as a young man, late teens, early 20s. He says, not hurting people, but up to no good. He said, on this particular night, and I've told the story just a couple of times. He says, me and my friend, we're on Swinemore Lane, and there's a we'll call it a hawthorn hedge or a hedgerow with a gap in it to get through into like what would have been a communal playing field or something.
Yeah.
And that's where we're getting to. Well, that's where we're walking to. He says, but I've got a crowbar in one hand and a bag of coins in the other. So work it out. Then they're walking. He says, and a police car comes up and pulls alongside of them. I can't remember if he said it had a torch on, but it's literally alongside of them.
Yeah.
It's looking. Can't see them.
Huh.
He said, we thought this is it. We're going to get done.
Yeah,
this is it.
Yeah.
It just slowly drives past. He says, but then we go into that field, he says, and then I'm presented with this huge, on all fours dog, bigger than a Great Dane, huge thing, like a small pony. He says, I'm looking at it. I said to my mate, look at that. He says, and there's a small sapling in the field.
Yeah.
A little tree. He says, and it just literally goes behind the tree and doesn't appear. Now, is that all part of this blanket of strangeness that they must have been immersed in that night? I can't see it as anything else. We can assume that the police were maybe looking for somebody that had been up to no good, but they couldn't be seen.
Yeah.
And quirky, strange stories like that fascinate me. I don't know what mechanics.
Reminds me, and this is like a funny little anecdote to add to this. So, one of the first times I met our mutual friend, we were invited into his dressing room at Port Vale's football ground.
Right, yeah.
Before the show. And this person had said, have you heard the tale of Skinwalker Ranch about the dog smoking cigarettes? And he had a friend who is a presenter on TalkSport. And spot on 93.
Yeah, just ignore it, kind of thing, Jay. Carry on what you're doing. I just put it up because I knew it was relevant. Thanks, Shadow.
No, this person that we're both mutual friends with, his mum was sat there. There was two of my buddies, this guy from TalkSport, and literally, so this person said, "Have you heard this story about dogs smoking cigarettes at Skinwalker Ranch?" And I said, yeah, weirdly, I have heard that story because I've heard George Knapp tell this story. And as the story goes, it was the Utes have their own tribal police out there. And two police officers are driving along one of the roads. And it's all farmland out there. And you've got a lot of sort of geographical features. It's not desert, but it's very barren in places. And they saw these two, what they thought were two like humanoids, wearing trench coats and I think trilbies. And they looked so out of place for that region that they were sort of patrolling, I guess, that they pulled over on the side of the road. And they turned round and he said, and this has been said more than on one occasion, they were dogs' heads, but humanoid in feature. And they were both smoking cigarettes. So the two police officers have kind of looked at each other in dumbfoundment, turned back around. The dogs are gone, but the cigarettes are on the floor.
Yeah.
Now, that would say this trickster element to what we're talking about. Is it something that sounds so ridiculous? And I'll tell you the funny caveat to this story. So a lot of people pay a lot of money to meet this person backstage and do meet and greet. So our friend gets called out after bringing up this story of Skinwalker Ranch and the dog smoking cigarettes. And his buddy, who's on TalkSport, this person leaves the room to go and do their work. And this guy, and I'll say his name, Andy Goldstein, looks at me and he goes, "So, dog smoking cigarettes here?" And I'm like, "Look, mate, if you told me this story, I'd think you were absolutely, excuse my language, batshit crazy. I know it makes no sense." And he just looks at me and he goes, "Don't you think they lack opposable thumbs to light the cigarettes?" And I'm like, I've kind of got a half smirk on my face because I'm like, "Look, mate, I don't know what to tell you. I can just tell you as the stories were repeated to me. But it's been said on more than one occasion." Now, to this guy you have only just met, I probably sound completely off my rocker. So I messaged our friend after the gig later that night, and I went, "Funny thing happened when you left." I said, "Your mate," I said, bit of a piss taker, isn't he? You know, in a nice way. I don't mean in a negative way. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I won't bring up anything like this in front of him. He just ripped the piss out of you." And I thought, I didn't bring it up. You did. And then you went, and I had to do the explanation
You have
for
to deal
you.
with it, yeah. No,
So,
well,
yeah,
that's the way of
funny
things.
little caveat to what we're discussing.
I mean, some of the things, they don't even bear thinking about. When I was looking into all the sheep fatalities, shall we say, 2017 to 2019, I'd be going out at 4:30. Well, sometimes 4 o'clock to get there at 4:30. Driving up these farm tracks with no lights on, so I didn't disturb the people. You know, if you see an headlight flashing your window and getting onto these fields, and it was strange. There were strange things happening. So people have been thinking, what's he on about now? Why come he's brought the sheep in? So I'd come and back home. Let's say I'd get back home daylight, 6, 7 o'clock. And Mary, she'll not thank me for saying this, and I wrote about it and I think Carl Jackson Barnes, publisher. When I wrote about it and I call it Scooby Doo, he wrote back to me and he went, "Scooby, don't," because he said it sounds that ridiculous. Yeah. So I goes in and Mary's awake and say it's 7:30, 8 o'clock. He says, "All right." She says, "No, not really." She says, "I woke up. There's room's not daylight. There's curtains are shut, but it's light enough in the room." She says, "And around the top of the room," and she don't see things like this. She's not doing anything weird or taking on any weird medication. She says, "And I can see the characters from Scooby-Doo looking down." How crazy is that? I've just set Mary up for a bit of ribbing now, and enough people. I realise that, but you know, that's a weird thing to tell me. And as I say, I did write about it, and I wrote about it in conjunction with the cheap fatalities. And Carl Jackson Barnes where he says to me, "Scooby, don't." He says because it's too much for some people to take in. Yeah. But I know my wife, and she's not lying about what she saw. She's not. She don't make an habit of hallucinating. Yeah. So some of these things are the strangest things you're ever going to see. When Bob Brown saw the silver disc over the sea, and that was 2017, I think, and he'd seen it that morning. He started and it kind of built up. He'd walk from South Shore to the charity shop where he works, and he still works, bless him. I mean, full credit to Bob. He says there's a black car just passes me very slowly. He says, and I see it on way home as well. Then he saw what he described as the men in black come and knock on the door. He says, now, you know, there's a little porch, probably 2 or 3 foot wide, frosted glass on inner doors. He opened the door, looked, and these guys are there, frightened him to death. Whether that's I don't know whether that's intimidation, but if so, for what reason? Because he only told me, and I didn't run with it. Do you know what I mean? I didn't start talking about it on live streams or anything straight away. Are you okay for time, Jay?
Yeah, perfect, mate. We can carry on for whatever. Just go where the conversation.
Well, I'll just go with this Dave Barker, and Dave lives in the area.
Great.
Do some of us see more because we look, or are we a magnet to the phenomena?
It's a good question. I think, back to what you were saying, and back to my own experiences with these shadow entities. I've never had anything other than my sighting in 2014, 1994. So it's like, to go, I've seen things out the corner of my eye, and I may have seen things that you sort of, the rational mind will go, it's a trick of the mind, or aperture or whatever. But then, these things that I was seeing, I remember because I used to box and do mixed martial arts fighting at the time. And there was always a musty smell. And 2, because obviously you sweat in your gloves. So when I'd come back from training, I used to hang them with the hook part on the radiator to air them out, because otherwise they stink. And I could make out other things in the room. And again, when this happened, because this was used to terrify me, I'm not ashamed to say it. You know, I woke up where I felt the sensation of someone yanking your legs. You know, you've seen me in the flesh. You know, I'm a big guy. I don't move around a lot in my sleep, according to, you know, past girlfriends that have said. And I woke up and my head is about that far away from my pillows and my legs are hanging over the end of the bed.
So something's happened.
Yeah. I've woke up and because I used to sleep with the duvet wrapped around my head. I guess, you know, maybe that was of some comfort to me while this was going on. And I felt someone suddenly yank the duvet, and I've woke up and the duvet's kicked off all the way on the floor at the foot of the bed. So it's like, you know, there's part of this where I'd be lying if you said, you know, is this a lucid dream or anything else? But then why haven't I ever had those dreams?
Yeah, and why are you having them now? They're just these episodes. Yeah. It's strange.
You know, we go back to Mr. Parks, we'll call him. When I spoke to him, and I eventually built up the courage to speak about this. I was at the Pro conference in Lytham St Anne's.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, I know the jury's out on this person, and he says a lot of controversial things, shall we say, that divides opinion. But when I spoke to him and he said, "Can I give you a hug?" And I'm not, you know, I'm a man's man. I'm not really into hugging other men. But I was like, okay. And then he whispered in my ear, "I'll have a word with someone and I'll make this stop. But you're going to start seeing a lot more things in the sky." And it did stop. And I did start seeing a lot more things in the sky. And one of the sightings, I was with an ex-girlfriend called Claire, and we were living in a place called Wrexham in North Wales. And our big bay window overlooks a place called, they call it World's End. It's up on the moors, very hilly. And it drops down into Llangollen, which isn't too far away from Flandrillo, where the Berwyn UFO came down.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, go on.
And she, you know, we've spoke about this before, but she was very, like, a lot of this stuff scared her. And a lot of the stuff, like, she'd sort of watch over my shoulder, you know, in a hesitant way. And I think, you know, when I quizzed her about this, she said, well, I exist within my bubble and I'm happy in that sphere of this bubble. And we were looking out, it would have been about January, February, cold, clear skies, few stars dotted about. And I turned round to her and I said, I would love it if you, because she, up to that point, she'd seen nothing. I would love it right now if something appeared that you had no conceivable explanation for. And no sooner than I said that, this bright, what looks originally like a star, white, bright white, low as the aircraft coming into land at Liverpool or Manchester. And it started moving towards the house. And her jaw's completely on the floor by this point. She's like, what is it? What is it? And I'm like, I don't know, but it's not blinking. So it's not an aircraft. You know, even like drones weren't really around at that point in time. Or if they were stupidly expensive.
Yeah.
And this thing, you know, probably about midnight, midnight at night, comes towards the house. I've ran downstairs on, you know, probably would have been an older iPhone. Tried to get a recording of this, and you know, visibly you can see the handshake on the video, and it just looks like a white dot from the footage that I saw. But this thing was so low. Yeah. There's nothing at least in my logic, that you could say what that was. And isn't it uncanny that I said to her, I would love it in
the universe.
Yeah.
You know, and it answered it. When our Oscar, my grandson, or one of them, I think he's 16 now, so we're going back a long time. And it was probably night before Sarah went in hospital, you know, they give you a date when you're going to go in. And we went through, me and Mary, and she were okay. And I says, do you fancy just a little run for 10 minutes, Sarah, half an hour? We'll just have a little run out. And me and Mary stayed with Luke, her husband, and that. And we just had a little run, and we went to a place called Osgerby, which isn't far away, just parked in a little bit of an area. A beautiful starlit night. We got out of the vehicle, and I saw 2 stars. I'm not saying this one meant for us, but it's just odd, like similar to what you've just said. We weren't talking about Unexplained. We could see RF Staxton Wold up on hill, so not far away, and it's beautiful, filled with stars. And there's 2 really big, bright stars that I didn't recognise. And and if Sarah's in, she'll remember this. And I just went, look at them, Sarah. They're unusual. And we both fixed on them, and they just went out. And they just think, how weird. They literally didn't fly away. They just went out. And
well, you know our friend Joel.
Yeah.
You met him backstage at one of the
Yeah.
concerts. You talked your head off, didn't he? Bless him.
I like to talk, Joel.
But we were out. So he used to live in a place called Morton, which is on the Wirral, close to Liverpool. And late at night, I was staying at his, having a bit of a lads' night. And we decided to go for a park up and have a walk on the shore. And you've got the Mersey estuary that goes out into the Irish Sea. And, you know, this is a guy that I'd say at the time has heard a lot of my stories, probably in his right mind been skeptical about them. And I was describing the way these things suddenly appear in the sky. Seconds later, and I mean seconds later, and Joel will back me up on this huge bright object appeared silently going along the sky out of nowhere, and then shrunk and collapsed in on itself. And again, you know, another situation where maybe consciously I've asked something to appear and it's gone, hello.
Yeah.
Actually, we've been up here the entire time. And ever since that day, you know, like he started seeing things and also having paranormal instances or things you coin, you know, to do with ghosts and apparitions and things like of that nature. So it's like there's times when, you know, as you know, I lost my mother several years ago, and I live in the city centre of Chester, and I live on like the 4th floor, so 4th flat up, 3rd floor, and I overlook Chester city centre, and I've got an amazing balcony that in the summer I sit there with the doors wide open at night, and I do this thing where I guess in times when I get a little bit low, as we all do, and I miss my mother, I talk to her out loud. And since I moved to Chester, bearing in mind I'm in the city centre, there's a lot of light pollution. It's not like living in North Wales where you've got loads of countryside. And I asked for, consciously in my mind, I asked for something to appear. Now, over to the right, when you're looking out the balcony, there's a council estate on the other side of the dual carriageway. And there's 3 high-rise council block flats, very tall.
Right.
As soon as I'd said that in my head, please give me a sign, because, you know, you want to know your loved ones are around you. This orangey, reddish orb appeared not much higher than those 3 flats, out of nowhere. Huge, bright, as I say, directly overhead, and the same thing. It shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, gone.
To nothing. What do you see that as confirmation that did it make you feel good?
Yeah, because like I didn't feel threatened by it or anything.
No, that's good then, isn't it?
There's only a couple of times where I've had that fight or flight response when I've done some stupid things in the past. But then this consciousness thing, and back to what Tom DeLonge speaks about, and what I touched upon earlier, is that he said, like, in some of these abduction cases, if you say the Lord's Prayer, even if you're not religious or have a denomination of sorts, the purity of the prayer can get rid of these things. Now, I'm not saying that because I know obviously religion divides opinion, but maybe it's the purity of the consciousness you're putting out.
I would agree. I think it's you touched on it earlier. You said You know, the actual power of what's inside here is incredible. And it's the fact that we believe that what we're saying and the purity of what we're saying can actually achieve that end. Just like when I've said it loads of times, people have heard me, I'm not an advocate of the Ouija board, but we believe that this board can touch the other side, somehow bridge the firewall. The board's not magical. It's what's in here that's touching it. But our belief, that becomes the conduit to do it. And just like the power of prayer, like what you're on about, I do believe that. I've got this question, going too deep into religion, Jay. I had someone attack my belief in the UFO and accuse my type of trying to destroy the Catholic Church / Vatican. It's a shame, Stan, isn't it? Because I think there's room for everybody, you know, and everything. And Stan's a great guy, and so they called him his type. So obviously, look upon somebody as though they're destroying religion. Well, we're not going to go deep into religion, are we, Jay? But
what I would say in a retort to what Stan has said is that the Vatican and the Catholic Church, which is like a city in itself, the Vatican, they're really up on this subject to the point where, you know, they've got their own observatory. They've had literal meetings on how and when this comes out, how it's going to affect religion going forward. So there is an interjection between spirituality and what we're dealing with, be it consciousness. But maybe our concept of organized religion is completely wrong.
Thank you, Jay. There's one that I've not heard, but this is going to swell up and become prominent over the next few days within ufology, I would think. Or not because of this question, but with all the Greenland, is there any truth in the rumour that Trump is after a partially unfrozen UFO that has recently been? I wouldn't have thought so. I think, but I've no idea. Maybe.
Well, it's funny. Ross Coulthard, great journalist and great mind he is. He did, because I subscribe to News Nation, who he reports for. And there was actually a video put out about a week ago saying about this buried UFO that supposedly, you know, exists there. And that's what the Americans' fascination with that area. But
with
again,
Greenland.
Yeah, apparently Greenland is known as a bit of a hotspot locally between people. You know,
fabulous. Can you imagine? And with global warming or the alleged global warming, more of the ice is being, diminishing. Who can say then? Because I know they're finding lots of mineral deposits, aren't they? And getting access to things that they couldn't normally get access to. Right, Steve Collin, let's have a look at this. So we're okay for another 10 minutes. Jay, have you heard of the Stardust Ranch in Arizona? It's as good as Skinwalker.
Yeah, so I used to speak to, what's his name? Something Edmonds, who used to run the ranch. John Edmonds, was it? He's passed away now. And he's done like interviews going back with Kerry Cassidy, Project Camelot, and spoken to some other people where he said he engaged with actual physical violence with these beings that would invade his ranch and harm his livestock, predominantly horses, I think it was.
Right.
So, yeah, I do know a bit about Stardust. And again, it was John Edmonds. Some of his claims sound so outside the realms of plausible thinking that most people, you know, laugh him off, so to speak. Yeah. But, you know, don't they, with all of this, you know, with some of the stuff
with some of the stuff we talk about and I've talked about, but also some of the things that people have said 20 years ago are now coming to fruition and they've just got laughed at 20 years ago. It's, you know, it's vindication for those people if they're still around, you know.
But isn't it crazy that, you know, going back 20 years and what was science fiction back then is now
there's no science
fact. Yeah. You know, we sit with the technology that we're doing this on tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Bumps in too. I'm going to say anything bum. Has anything strange happened in Landudno, is it? Or Landudno recently visited there loads over the years, but I hadn't realised it was a hotspot until I heard TP hearing Jay on Paranormal Monkey the other week.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. So obviously you've got the Great Orme, which is this mountain. I think it's a few meters shy of being a mountain.
Okay.
And I've got a buddy who's renovating a house there called Matthew, a very dear friend to me, and someone who's like a brother. Now, I'll talk about one of our encounters. Matt had a day job, and when we were renovating his house, he picked me up at 8 o'clock at night, and we'd work through the night till the early hours of the morning renovating this property. And, you know, in the winter, very cold.
Josh is in. Just one sec. Good to see you, Josh. Need to have a catch up. But go on, Jay. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so we're outside, and you know, like Matt, I call him Matt or Matty, has had his own strange happening, shall we say, as he was growing up. But we're outside, and again, one of these orbs comes over. It must have been about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, what appeared slow to us that we're watching, and again, it's low, it's silent, white ball of light, incredibly low, probably the size of a beach ball, I'd imagine. And it's, as I say, as it's come over our heads, we both sort of stood in amazement, and he's looked at me and gone, well, what is it? And I'm like, well, I can tell you what it isn't, for a start. Now, where this house is, it's on a hill in Llandudno, and you can see right across Liverpool Bay. Because if you go across that neck of the sea, as the crow flies, you'd end up towards Liverpool over the Irish Sea. This thing, you know, my friend will back me up on that. It was gone in about 3 to 4 seconds.
Really?
Yeah, over Liverpool. So slow as it came over us, and then little dots in the horizon, and it's gone. So that was a few years ago now. Matt sent me video. It would have been during Christmas, so literally a couple of weeks ago. And he's now renovating this house, getting it ready to sell, which is another story. And he, you know, to pass the time, because I imagine renovating a house in winter, there's no heating or anything. Oh. And he's gone outside to wake himself up because he has a day job as well. And he's filmed these two things, and they almost look like they're dancing around each other in the sky and putting on this. I think it's great footage. And to him, it's probably one of the best things he's ever seen.
Yeah.
You know, so he shared this with me, and he was like, wow, I've stood watching these things till cloud cover came in, and they've disappeared from sight. Now, that's over Llandudno. Now, it's, if you look and you believe in the theory about ley lines and the Earth's magnetic grid, which does have a correlation to what we're talking about with this phenomenon, where the ley lines run through, they intersect into Llandudno, because Llandudno is a peninsula. So where this Great Orme is, the sea stretches all the way round, and it goes towards Conway and Anglesey and out towards Puffin Island and that way. So you kind of like, when you go up on this mountain, we'll call it a mountain, you've got kind of the 360 view. Right. Now, oddly, on the summit of this mountain, there's actually a little UFO museum. And I managed to speak to the owner. It's been there for years. It's no bigger than my bathroom. In all honesty, it's not a massive museum.
No.
But what he's done is picked up newspaper reports from in and around the Conway and Llandudno area of North Wales. And obviously Margaret Fry, who was one of the main investigators of that area, and later people like Scott Felton got involved with obviously the Berwyn case. And the work that they did was absolutely astounding. And some of these reports, and there were some photographs actually printed with this. One's over the pierhead, and you can clearly see, and if you search, say, like UFOs Llandudno, if you can track this picture down, it's of, what do you call it, Coast Guard, orange helicopter with the black writing on. And to the left is what you would describe as a flying disc.
I think I've seen it.
Yeah, and it's over the pierhead in Llandudno, and I probably estimate the picture was took in the late 80s, early 90s. So it's quite grainy compared to, the pixelation of what we would take now. So I don't think it's been doctored, or it's hoax, or someone throwing up a hubcap and you've just managed to.
I'm looking at time, and I just thought I'll throw that in because Lee's done moderating all night, and we aren't. And if there's anybody else put questions in, we're not going to get to them. I do apologise, but Jay, do you think each paranormal subject has a job to do? I hope you're well, kidder.
I'm all good, mate. Thank you, and it's great to hear from you. I love Lee a bit. Met him on a couple of occasions now. Great guy, and the work he does for yourself is
so positive. Lee's just positive.
Oh, yeah.
To say that. All he does is help people, which is just amazing, nice, really. Right. Yeah.
Now,
absolutely.
Aside from the UFO thing, like I'll be at the Haunted Hotel, as it's called, in Chester on Wednesday night doing an investigation. So when I speak at these events, and so what they do sometimes on the final day is I'm the odd guy out because I'm the UFO guy, and the rest of these guys are into poltergeist, demonology, exorcism, all these things that basically, Bigfoot community, Loch Ness monster, we all segregate it. When I will always start my talk by saying everything is paranormal until it becomes explainable. Yeah. And if you look at the Latin meaning for the word para, and we know this from like words like paramedic, parachute, what para kind of translates to is urgent. So it's an urgent phenomenon. It's happening then and there. And what that's deemed as, so like in my work, a lot of people, when you say the word paranormal, they just think of ghost hunters or some of these TV shows, and they may see an apparition or a shadow being. Completely credible programming, but that's where it stops. It's segregated off, and you've got your UFO guys, you've got your Bigfoot guys, your cryptid guys. And I always say when I do these panels, we all need to kind of suspend our prejudices against one another and kind of come together. And I think
there's just so much segregation and pigeonholing of each body's. Well, we've got big UFO organizations, Jay, as you know, and they'll take an incredible UFO report, and there'll be something that's slightly off in that report, such as, oh, and you'll never believe it, after this report, we saw a Bigfoot. Or the cryptid researcher says he's seen spheres of light. But it don't conform with what we want to hear, because we're only interested in a fur-covered hominid in the forest, and we're only interested in UFOs. We don't want to hear about that, but it's interlinked. It is there.
And I quickly we'll touch upon. I watch some of these Bigfoot shows. There's a good one called Finding Bigfoot, and Expedition Bigfoot. Finding Bigfoot, I think they did about 10 seasons, and coincidentally, they never found Bigfoot, which is an amusing caveat to that. But they always leave you on a cliffhanger, and
when they come back after advert, they've knocked a cup of coffee over. There's no exciting happening, is there?
But on this show I was watching, they went out to this hotspot where there'd been Sasquatch or Bigfoot activity. And they actually filmed these spheres of light, which are similar in nature to what I've seen in the sky. Now, what's the crossover between something that, a lot of these Bigfoot guys will be completely dismissive about what we do and what we see? But what's the correlation that, you go out to one of these hotspots and you see these things dancing and weaving their way through the trees, which would imply, at least to my guess, that these things are intelligent in nature.
Yeah, there's some kind of direction. They know what they're doing, don't they? They're moving through the trees, not just passing through as some kind of, I don't know, like a torch beam would pass over them.
Yeah.
But do you know something, Jay? We've absolutely smashed 2 hours here, and just before we kind of close this down, do you want to tell anybody what you're doing this year or what your plans are? I know we set off in that vein earlier, but maybe got you on.
Yeah, so there's going to be an event now announced, I think, in September of this year that I've been asked to speak about. I think the guys in the chat, you mentioned his name earlier, Alienate, a guy called Andy DeCoze, who's a good friend of mine. So him and one of the girls from Twinvestigate, Emma Louise Thornton, who's a good friend, and they've approached me about speaking at this event. So what I would say is the best thing to do is follow me on Facebook, send me a friend request, follow the page, The Anomaly Archives. It's quite a colourful header, as I'm an artist myself. So follow me on there and stay up to date. I've got a couple more podcasts to do in the next couple of weeks. And then, as you know yourself, mate, it changes from week to week. This subject. So.
Just as a little heads up, as I say, there's Josh in here, Josh Turner.
Yeah.
And if you've not looked at Josh's site, it's Paranormal Roundtable, which is huge. And Josh can just run it on his own. He can sit there for 3 or 4 hours just talking, and he's listening to me now. So he knows.
You know what? It's one of my favourite channels to watch.
Brilliant. Well, what I was just going to say is maybe Josh ought to consider giving you or talking to me afterwards tomorrow, preferably Josh, and we'll see if we can connect you up with Jay, because I think you'd enjoy listening to Jay and speaking with Jay. Likewise, want to get you back on this channel, Josh, and give me a nudge, and I'll be over to Paranormal Roundtable. So yeah, just always give Josh a plug, because whenever you go on his channel, just like Truth Proof, great bunch of people for the most part, and you feel like you're part of a good sort of community, of people. So yeah, Paranormal Roundtable, have a look at it if you haven't already, and subscribe, because he's a great guy.
Well, one of the things I just want to interject with, mate, some of the questions tonight have been fantastic, and they always are when I tune in to watch you interview other people. It's literally one of the best channels.
Well, what's funny is that before we came on, you'd got a pile of questions to ask me.
Yeah,
you said, I'm going to ask you, and we've not got to them, have we? We've got other things. I sound like that old bloke off Vicar of Dibley, then, didn't I? We
did.
We've got other things to talk about, but we've not, because do you know what? You guys, you've just led it for us. You've given us the questions, and I know that there's some that I haven't asked, and I have actually passed over a few because you've asked a question before. But it's just great. It's just great having your support, really, to be honest with you. Just chuck my daughter's name up there, Laura. There you go. And so you know Laura anyway, don't you? So
yeah. Hi to Laura, Gemma, Lee.
And there's another one. You just haven't got enough. Hollywood knows about the phenomena. I mean, Ollie's great. We've had a
really good friend of mine. She actually said she's going to give you a call over the next week or so. So
yeah, no worries. Look forward to speaking with you. So I think then, Jay, from myself, I just want to say thank you, Jay. Thanks for everybody in chat for supporting us tonight. We've sort of held in between 340 and 350 people. So brilliant. Chuffed to bits. Well, that's because of you, Jay. I've not had out to do. I've just been a passenger. It's been great.
No, but at the same time, Paul, I know I'm probably going to embarrass you by saying this, but, as a friend, and I touched upon, I look up to you as a mentor. What I will say to your audience is Paul is one of the most authentic and genuine people you will ever come across in this topic and outside of this topic. So, from myself, I thank you.
No, you're welcome.
All the boots on ground research that you do, mate, and thank you for being a friend as well.
You're welcome, and I'm not putting this up for anybody to donate any money to Truth Proof, but I just want to say for everybody that has, thank you. And look at that, Josh. Thank you very much, sir. Honestly, most appreciated. And I've just bought a set of new microphones today, DJI mics, so that's absolutely amazing. Thank you, guys. I'm going to say good night. Are you stopping for a minute after we've closed down?
Yeah, we'll stop for a minute.
Yep. So good night, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. Is this an adventure or what? We don't need Unexplained Phenomena. I hope you guys are enjoying this journey we're taking you on. I know you come expecting to hear about big cats, cryptids, UFOs. We will touch on some of that, but I think it's worth sharing some of this for you, don't you? There's only 2 living souls up here today.
Because I can see it in my mind, I can see it in my head what I saw, but I can't describe.
Our eyes was closed, like a brightish light in my face, and I just felt paralysed.
Someone said there's something out there, so we had a look. It looked like a walnut. That's the only way I can describe it.
It was like it had loads of tiny little windows all over it, and it had lights in those windows, but not a light that illuminates.
Anyway, we were ushered into this lounge. This fella come in and said, whatever you saw was a weather effect.
And everything is deathly silent. There's no sea, there's no wind, there's no night noise, because, you know, there's foxes all over here. There's nothing.